Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a set of sources that give a really cold analysis of the standoff between Donald Trump and Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. But we're not here to talk about the usual politics.
No, not the headlines, not the moral arguments either. Our
Exactly.
mission today is it's really laser focused. We're stripping away all that rhetoric to look at this whole crisis as a clinical case study.
A case study in raw power strategy.
That's it. And what makes the source material so compelling is how it frames this clash. It's like a roadmap for understanding how domination works when the power behind it believes it has, well, zero accountability.
Right, it's analyzing everything through this prism of pure strategy. Power versus weakness, perception versus reality. And the first point the sources make is really sharp. It's that chaos.
Mhm.
It isn't just some unfortunate byproduct of the conflict.
No, not at all. It is very often the most effective tool.
The tool for what?
For control. For control, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of chaos as a kind of strategic fog. I mean, if you want to dismantle an existing structure, government, an economy, whatever, you have to paralyze anyone who might resist.
And the fog does that.
It does. When every single day brings a new, completely contradictory claim or a new threat, how can an opposition form a unified front? It can't. Confusion is a method of control because it just drains the energy, the emotional and organizational energy out of any resistance.
Which brings us right to the first major strategic move the sources point to. They call it the strategy of exposure. This is the moment when power just stops pretending.
Stops pretending it has some kind of moral high ground or, good intentions.
And when looking at Donald Trump's approach, the sources see this profound shift away from hiding what he was really after.
Yes, and what's so fascinating is the observation that his administration basically bypassed all the usual diplomatic language.
The talk of humanitarian aid or promoting democracy.
All of it, gone. Instead, they spoke what the source calls power's real, unmasked dialect. Fear, oil, force, and domination.
And the analysis argues those weren't just slips of the tongue, not accidents. The sources really emphasize that Donald Trump framed Venezuela not as a sovereign nation that needed help, but explicitly as a prize.
That word is so important, a prize. The specific phrases he used, oil, control, running the country, they were all critical signals of the true intent.
So to really get the strategic weight of that, what's the context?
Well, you have to look at the established rules of power. I mean, the classic playbook from Machiavelli onward. It usually advises leaders to say, less than necessary.
Keep your cards close to your chest.
Right. That restraint gives you diplomatic room to maneuver. It maintains the illusion of a higher purpose.
But the sources argue Donald Trump followed a much more dangerous principle, one that only works if a ruler feels totally untouchable.
Exactly. It's when they openly reveal their true goals because they've calculated that being honest about their greed is, in that moment, more powerful than being a hypocrite.
And once those motives are exposed,
you can't pretend again. That's the critical psychological point. You just can't put that genie back in the bottle. That moment of clarity, it fundamentally changed how the world saw Venezuela.
how so?
It instantly reduced the nation from a sovereign state to an object ripe for possession.
So it's a rebranding.
It's a strategic reduction. It's step one in justifying dominance because it makes an external intervention look less like an invasion and more like, I don't know, a necessary repossession.
And that open strategy, it immediately forced a counter strategy, didn't it? This brings us to the invisible battle for legitimacy and narrative control. If Donald Trump's offense was based on being transparent about his intent.
Then Nikolas Maduro had to run a survival strategy. Pure and simple.
And that survival depended on
Psychological warfare, specifically using the incredibly powerful weapon of national pride. The sources note how the regime survived not just through brute force, but by successfully controlling the narrative inside the country.
You see that so clearly with leaders like Delcy Rodriguez, right? When she declared Venezuela would never be a colony.
That wasn't just rhetoric. It was a strategic move. She was invoking wounded dignity, national memory.
And the sources are really clear on this point.
They are. Nothing mobilizes popular support against an outside threat faster than the fear of being colonized again.
So it's a classic case of projecting strength even when you're weak.
The law is never appear desperate. By framing Donald Trump's actions not as liberation but as colonialism, Nicolas Maduro successfully positioned himself as the only one who could protect them. And that insulates him from any internal opposition that might have otherwise sided with the U.S., you see.
But the sources stress that Donald Trump's team then used a maneuver that was ironically designed to hit that internal opposition where it hurt.
Ah, yes, the public discarding of allies.
This part of the analysis is maybe the most chilling part of the entire sequence.
It is. When Donald Trump publicly dismissed opposition figures like Maria Corina Machado, calling her not respected or irrelevant, he was using that one person as a strategic pawn in a much, much bigger game.
I hadn't really thought of it that way. How does insulting one person become a weapon against a whole movement?
Because it shatters two vital illusions. First, the illusion of moral clarity. It tells the world the U.S. isn't backing the opposition because of ideology. It's backing them purely for tactical convenience.
And the second illusion?
That's the crucial one. It serves as a chilling warning to every potential ally watching, both inside Venezuela and around the world.
A warning that your loyalty is temporary.
Precisely. It signals that if you align with American goals, you are completely disposable the second you stop being useful. Abandoned allies become warnings to others.
So that maneuver actually weakened any credible internal alternative to Nikolas Maduro.
Yes, fulfilling a very dark strategic imperative. Do not destroy what you cannot replace. If the opposition is fragmented, leaderless, and scared, the chaos actually helps the incumbent regime. It's the only stable thing left.
Wow. Okay, so if isolating allies was the price for the opposition, the next move was designed to just compound that paralysis. Let's move into weaponizing confusion. The analysis says this is a deliberate method of control because it exhausts resistance.
And we saw this play out in the just overwhelming contradictions coming from the U.S. administration at the time.
You mean the competing narratives?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. One spokesperson called the action a military invasion.
Right. And then another claimed it was strictly a legal arrest, an extradition.
And a third one says, no, it's not about drugs or law. It's explicitly about oil.
And the sources are very firm on this. This wasn't just sloppy messaging.
Not at all. The analysis suggests these contradictions were deliberate. The function of all this conflicting information is, well, it's a form of psychological terrorism.
Because if a population or even the UN can't agree on what just happened,
they struggle to organize a coherent response. It's the application of that power law. Cultivate an air of unpredictability to keep others in suspended terror. The target population gets so busy just trying to figure out the shifting goalposts. Is it human rights? Is it drugs? Is it oil? That they can't effectively organize.
But that intentional confusion, it was also paired with very real physical escalation. The sources point specifically to the reported deaths of Cuban soldiers who were guarding Nikolas Maduro.
Yes. Symbolically, that was the moment this moved beyond just words.
That was an escalation.
A clear, unmistakable escalation. It was a warning that not only would internal opposition be dismissed, but international alliances would be punished. That was a message sent not just to Havana, but to Moscow, to Beijing.
And strategically, the sources see this as a huge error.
A crucial one. It violates that law. Never force your enemy into a corner with no exit.
Why is that so important?
Because if you cut off all their avenues of retreat, and you threaten their life support, in this case their foreign allies, a cornered enemy won't negotiate. They'll escalate, often violently.
Right.
The deaths of those Cuban soldiers, it transformed the situation overnight. It stopped being a domestic Venezuelan crisis, and it became an international insult in the eyes of Russia and China.
Which guarantees more global involvement.
The exact opposite of what a swift, localized operation needs.
And that connection takes us right to the final section. Zooming out to the global implications, this is where it gets really interesting for you listening. We're looking at precedent as permission.
Absolutely. The sources argue that Donald Trump's willingness to act without any international restraint or consensus, while openly stating the goal, was resources. That sent a definitive signal across the globe.
What was the signal?
That strength now defines legitimacy.
I hadn't thought of it like that. How does one action become permission for, say, Russia or China?
They watch the reaction, or rather, the lack of reaction. They see the world's most powerful player break the illusion of sovereignty for stated resource gain, and they realize the underlying rules of the game have just changed for everyone.
So restraint is now optional?
If your strength is sufficient, yes. It's the ruthless principle that actions, not words, define the rules of the game.
And the sources use this to raise some really provocative questions. If you can justify an intervention by just saying you want oil, What stops China from applying the exact same logic to Taiwan?
Or what stops Russia from doubling down in Ukraine? Once that precedent is set, that a powerful nation can just dismiss sovereignty for its own benefit, that lesson is immediately absorbed by every authoritarian leader looking for a justification.
They see the lack of consequences and they calculate their own risks.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the sources point out the internal cost of this strategy was immediate. It was domestic. The analysis highlights Congress member Pat Ryan's reaction. He said he immediately recognized the pattern of forever wars born from vague justifications.
And that's the uncomfortable truth, the sources stress.
Yeah.
The consequences of power are inherited. We might think the strategy only affects Venezuela, but the analysis argues that fear travels forward in time.
And we can't overlook what the sources call the quiet victory that comes after the loud aggression.
The normalization of excess.
That sounds powerful. What does it actually mean in this context?
Well, the sources point to the language used. The framing of resource theft, the legal ambiguity, by using language that mirrors authoritarian tactics, like Putin's special operation, framing for Ukraine.
Donald Trump normalized those ideas in the Western conversation.
Yes, the quiet victory isn't winning the immediate battle. It's making future similar aggression acceptable, both abroad and at home. The bar for what's acceptable behavior is permanently lowered.
Which brings us to our final synthesis. It seems pretty clear the tragedy here, as the sources put it, is that once power takes off the
mask of morality, of diplomacy,
it rarely puts it back on. The language of pure domination redefines reality for everyone.
And this leads to the core psychological takeaway of this whole strategy. According to the analysis, Donald Trump's greatest strategic failure might actually be a psychological one, removing the illusion that once restrained American power.
The concept of illusion as lubrication.
Exactly. The source calls illusion lubrication. If you remove it, everything just grinds to a halt. The traditional processes of diplomacy, of compromise, they're all built on a certain amount of pretense.
And without that pretense,
resistance doesn't disappear. It sharpens. It becomes more ideological, more tenacious, and a lot harder to co-opt.
So we've looked at this clash not as a political story, but as a textbook study in pure, unmasked strategy. The open declaration of motive.
The calculated confusion.
And the abandonment of allies. All of them strategic levers pulled for maximum control and, it seems, minimum accountability.
Indeed. The lesson for you, learner, is to recognize that when a ruler speaks that real language of domination, it often costs less at home in the short term, but the global costs, the precedents that get set, are always inherited by the future.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question the sources pose for you to think about. Was this the moment the age of restraint officially ended? Not with a treaty, but with a calculated exposure of intent. And if might has reclaimed its ancient throne, what happens when domination becomes acceptable again and peace becomes the anomaly?